Okay, thanks everybody for showing up on this very nice occasion of a rainy Sunday morning with no better topic rather than talking about movies and dealing with the past. So thanks for the motivation. Come here and I'll ask for your patience to listen to this through 1 hour or even more. I will not take too long to introduce our guests today. They are Aurela Kadriu from Pristina, Ana Pejović from Belgrade, and our own from here, from Strug actually, Jakov Popovski, who is a friend, and we've spent some time in Eurofestival where I was a member of the jury there. I mean, it is always a problematic thing to start to discuss about movies and the past in the Balkans, because it's already a toxic mix. We have this art form, which is movies, which have been historically used and misused for different sorts of ideas and propaganda. And then we have the Balkans, which is not probably the most democratic region in the world, where you have a lot of different competing ideas about how the societies should look, and then movies there usually are one very playful tool which can provide and propagate this or the other sort of ideas. So in order not to make this a very boring and long introduction, but I can do it, I finished philosophy, so I would like to start the discussion with Aurela Kadriu, because recently I have been kind of researching and thinking why there is so much still relentless over focus in Kosovo on the history of the recent war, that even the new generation of filmmakers, they tend to focus too much on this. But what is specific and interesting is that the most recent, let's say, movie successes internationally from Kosovo are from this, if you can call it, new wave female directors. Mm-hmm. So on the one side, you would expect that these new wave directors, especially female voices, would focus on completely different issues and leave the already mainstream, over-saturated field of war movies to the history and relegate it to the past. But then we see, for example, especially in the last, two examples, I would take Spia, Argos, and The Hive. Mm-hmm. We see that there is this sort of, again, kind of war movie dealing with the past, with the consequences and the traumas of the past, but it is from a female perspective. So do you think that there was this need to fill in this gap of a female, let's say, gaze or female narrative of the history and traumas of the war before we see the new Kosovo cinematography making movies about young people traveling into space in Kosovo?
This is a good question, because if you ask me, we're not talking enough. We haven't talked enough. We haven't unpacked the war as a society and in art making as well. Be it theater, be it film, we're talking about film here. Because I say this in the article that will also be published, that there has been a lot of artworks and there have been many films done about war, but most of them have contributed to further polarize this already polarized narratives. So the war is about heroes, it's about traitors. There are many nuances in between that were not explored. So I would say that there have been a lot of films made about war, but little has been spoken about war. Little we have unpacked about war. And what I see in the recent films which you mentioned, of course, the female perspective, the woman perspective was absolutely not represented. Women were not represented, as they are not represented in many other artworks. Their stories were not represented. So what I see is this new wave that is already being recognized as the new female wave in filmmaking, but it's also a resistance to refuse to believe that all the questions have been answered, but to rather open new questions, to question the questions. And this is what the new wave of filmmakers are making, the young filmmakers, us, me and Sauran, are doing, because we do not find ourselves on those stories. we know that that's not the story that we have been inherited. That's not the trauma that we have been inherited. So you start asking questions, you remain curious, which is what the young filmmakers or this new wave of filmmakers are doing. So we are unpacking the in-between polarization, because we don't stand in any of those polars, and we know that we are part of this story, but we kind of have been denied that space in this story. We have been questioned that space in this story, so we are claiming it. And I think, just to go back to my previous conclusion, that of course we're going to discuss about this in the context of the region as well, because there is also a lot to discuss in that regard. But just to go back to my first answer, is that we have done films. There have been films done about the war, but little has been unpacked. So if you look at them, they're all the same, contributing to the same narratives, to the same polars.
Yeah, but when you say, this is the last impression before we move with Anna, when you say we have been denied a voice, who has denied you?
No,
it is a generational thing, or
it's a generational thing. It's a matter of who has the space, because we know that who is represented is defined by forces that are not controlled by individuals. And it's a matter of privilege of who has the means to say something publicly and to have that showcased publicly. So we can get into these dynamics, but it's class, it's geographical, it's cultural, it's generational as well.
Thanks. And taking the conversation from there, I think I would want to introduce Anna now, and especially with a very contextualized question that I want to ask you, and that is related also to your professional work as a writer and translator. And when I read from your biography that you have also translated Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil, and I want to relate that to the recent productions in Serbia that kind of look to the past, that try to, let's say, unpack a certain very recent history of Serbia, and especially here I have in mind the two little mini-series, Sablja and Porodica, one dealing with Milosevic, the other one with Djindjic history. But then also this year there was a new movie which was called Bauk, has to do with the intimate life of the family during the NATO bombardment of Belgrade. But in all these movies, we see kind of the way in which these movies try to tell, narrate, or open or unpack some part of the history is very careful, because there is always this story about war which is lurking in the background, but it's not very well represented, because most probably the banality of evil is not that interpreted politically and socially in Serbia, which is not that ready still maybe to accept some things and to face some things from the past. And there I would also like to ask you, and in relation to that concept of banality of the evil, there is this movie which is called Teret, that was a few years ago, and then it was called in Serbia like a scandalous movie, which kind of puts the finger on some sort of guilt that socially and collectively we haven't, say we speak regionally, we haven't yet been ready to take over. So how do you think these recent movies, or even other ones that you might be more aware, how do you think, how much justice do they do to the need of opening a sincere democratic discussion about the recent past, not so far away, which might serve as thoughts for ideas about the future?
I would like to add up to something that we just heard about Kosovar cinematography. Nowadays, I think two good examples of a new female gaze into the conflicts of the 1990s have happened in the past 2-3 years. One is the film called Celts, Kelty, by a super young film director. It's a she, Milica Tomic. And the other one is called 78 Days, and is a family story of a very young girl during the NATO bombing from March to June 1999. What I really appreciate is that the new generation is trying to find new narratives, new ways to speak about the wars and the trauma. It's always a very individual gaze, and this is maybe the reason that both of the film directors were really young during this time. It's again a children's perspective that could be dangerous and utilized in a not very good manner, but I think both films show how the trauma of children and women during the 1990s is really something that is not owned in film. It's not owned in literature, it's not maybe in modern arts, but this is also disputable, questionable. And I'm really looking forward to what will happen in the future, because it's really the time has come that both, I think, female perspective and a new look into the conflict needs to come. The Serbian film has seen in the past 10 years, I think, a really heavy wave of self-victimization movies, beginning with Dara from Jasenovac, Dara iz Jasenovca, then the film about Operation Storm that was produced last year. There were also several films focusing on the Serbian victimhood in Kosovo during the war or between the end of the war and the March pogrom in 2004. And those are mostly state-financed films, really directed through, I mean, you can always follow the money and see where the source is coming from. And I think it's quite brave that the new generation of female directors is trying to somehow combat this narrative. And when it comes to the two series about the fall of Milosevic, about the last months of Milosevic family before he was arrested and taken to The Hague in 2001, and Sablja, they go, I think, quite deeply into the two extremely traumatic moments of the recent history after the wars, and that is the role and the relationship of Serbian nation with the Hague Tribunal, and the assassination of our prime minister, and what has come afterwards. It's done by the same team of people, which is also interesting. There were some problems with the premiere of with the date of Sablja, and somehow, I mean, we see that there are two lines. The one line is really this self-victimization, trying to connect the Second World War and the narrative of victimhood with the narratives of the victimhood in the late wars, all three or four, if we count Slovenian, and the other counter narrative is the one that is trying to either find a neutral ground, which is the case with Sablja and Porodica, or to go deeply into the trauma, which is the movies of Ognjen Glavonjić, Teret and Dubina 2. One is the documentary, and the other is a feature film about the mass second or third mass graveyards of Kosovar Albanian civilians in two places in Serbia. And again, we can follow the money and see where the funds have come. For the two films by Ognjen Glavonjić, it came from NGO sector, and so far he hasn't done a new film. And this only can tell about the struggle to what the Serbian film industry and the state wants to say, and what it wants to hide.
Yes, but when you say, we know that in the region, I mean, due to the market and due to the different sources of support, we know that Serbia has the biggest and most active film production in the region. This, on the one hand, can provide as fertile ground for kind of slowly opening new ideas and topics, as you said. These two miniseries, they don't go that deep into all that post-traumatic, and then on the other hand, you have movies that they are really going deep into the social unconcealed collective traumas that they are there and are probably not yet ready to admit. And from there, I want to ask, you said that there is a new reading of the heritage of what happened in the past. There is a new generation, there is a new approach. But in North Macedonia, our past was not that peaceful as well, although in the 90s we were called the oasis of peace. But this oasis had its own traumas. And apart from few very films that kind of deal with some issues from the recent past, not the movies that like Treta Polovreme that deal with the Second World War. Of course, we all know the Milče Mančevski Before the Rain. But after this, it seems like the younger generation of filmmakers in North Macedonia is interested in topics that have nothing to do with the past. That they are kind of weirdly looking forward, or new genres as well, or social issues are predominant actually. Social commentaries on the recent crisis, and if we could say in one word what is the North Macedonian cinematography in the last 20 years, it is relentless commentary on the result of the transition, the social consequences of the transition. And we have enough of movies dealing with this aspect, the transition, poverty, and everything. But we don't have any movie that, or anyone that is significantly good, that deals with certain traumatic histories of the recent past in North Macedonia. So I want to ask you, because you are well into the industry, is this a positive or negative thing? Is it a matter of lack of courage or lack of interest?
Yes, well, Ana and Aurela were speaking. I was thinking about that our cinematography almost completely ignores the conflict, the war, so far. And a few years ago, when I was reading my thesis, I was analyzing Macedonian cinema since 1991. So I got to a point where I see that till then, most of the films were about collective trauma of the Macedonian people, the collective pathos. And there were few different, of course, but after that, the filmmakers from that generation and so far till today, we don't deal with these topics. So why is that happening? It's probably because on the contrary of Serbia, Bosnia, Kosovo, after the conflict, the two opposite sides stayed together and lived together in the same country, in the same system. We had the change of the constitution, the rights were changed in a positive way, and having that in mind, having that peace deal from Ohrid, we have now a situation where we don't talk about that a lot, because we are putting that in the political part of our society, which is either some ethnicity gave something to the other one, or the other one is not satisfied with what they have as a rights here. And that's in the political part. In the film industry, I think it's completely ignored. There were a few known incidents in the period of that conflict, that they were covered by the media, by the journalists, but we never dwelled into the people who were in that conflict enough. We never seen enough from those people, so we, me as a screenwriter or my colleagues, would be inspired by those stories. And the final thing I think is still the fragility, and of course we are afraid to open some things that could change the narrative or just keep it polarized as in Kosovo.
I think that it remains still a little bit of a mystery and unknown thing why exactly young filmmakers in Macedonia do not treat these issues. It might be due to the education in which they grow up with, that the professors are uninterested in these topics, but also we don't have a lack of festivals in our country. There is also the politics of the festivals, what becomes trendy and what is acceptable. That I think the collection of all these elements, they impact this sort of weird, I would say, very intense relation with social topics, but no relation with whatsoever that is more political, ethnic, national, religious thing in the country, which is now the most mixed ethnically, religiously in the region. And then while we are talking about the movies that deal with the past, we cannot ignore the, let's say, the big question there, which is probably the most traumatic of the recent past in ex-Yugoslavia and the process of breakup of Yugoslavia, and it is the Srebrenica, and of course we're talking about Quo Vadis Aida, which was a movie that had huge regional, international impact and success. But actually what we see there is more or less what you have known from before, and what is expected, of course, with a little bit more of an emotional and intimate narrative from the perspective of a woman again. Do you think that this appeal, the level and scale of appeal of that movie is a result of, let's say, a more or less international/Western consensus on what took place in Srebrenica, as opposed if you would now do a similar movie about Gaza, where there is no a Western hegemonic narrative acceptance that this what's going on there that there is horrible. So I'm asking you now, as most probably Aurela as a filmmaker, if this temporality is important in the decision when you make on treating certain issue. Do you have to take into consideration what are the political circumstances in this situation? When can I make the best shot to tell this story? Or it is that you make the movie as a political act, as a political gesture, and then you fight with that afterwards?
It shouldn't be, in fact, because I think it would be limiting to this curiosity that is the foundation that should bring you to make a film, or the fact that you want. And just to make it clear, I produce, and I am a researcher and sociologist by qualification, but I am not a creative filmmaker in that sense. But I believe very strongly, and I know very strongly, that it would compromise this curiosity that should be there. You know, dealing with film industry, I have come to learn the unfortunate truth that there are many political dynamics, market-oriented dynamics that determine whether a film will be awarded, whether a film will make it, whether a story will be heard and discussed about and problematized, no matter how crucial it is for you who made it and for the society that you think, or for the audience in this case, that you think needs to discuss, needs to see this, needs to reflect on this topic. So no, it does not have to be determined, it should not be determined by these forces, but it unfortunately is. And I believe when it comes to because I have the feeling, and there is this open discussion, you reminded me of Hive. So we should know that, of course, this is something that there is this opinion about Hive, about Dirta Bashone's film, that it's nothing that we don't know about, but it's everything that the West doesn't know. So I think it's also important where you want this story to go, who you want to tell this story to. Of course, it should communicate with us, but we know, we just did not problematize it on screen. The story of Arya Moti, the story of women of Krusha, of women in general. Of course, we are familiar with those stories. I hear those stories every day. I have grown up with those stories, and many of my peers have grown up with those stories. But it is important, this is the power of film, that you make it a society's problem. And you decide which group of society you want to make it a problem for. Do you want to make it a problem for the local audience, or do you want to make it a problem for the international audience? And I think it's the same. Mm-hmm. The same with Quo Vadis Aida. So it's a matter of you have to remain curious, because these stories are in front of us, and we tend to become immune to them. You know, the story of the film that we are currently making with Sovran, it's a story that I grew up with, hearing stories like that. But this is the insistence, if it's a word in English, because I don't know the word in English, insistenscă mulie, to not become immune, because you know that this story is familiar to you, but it does not mean that it is familiar to everyone else. So this is the kind of curiosity that I'm talking about, that should not be determined by these forces. There should not be a momentum, because we are now almost 30 years after the war. We have grown up with these stories, and this is not the momentum to talk about them. We would rather talk about corruption. And it is a more present topic. But we have to be immune. We have to resist and stay curious.
And now, with that immunity in mind, I think that it is sort of a more abstract take into the very motivation, very drive to it. But when you have to deal with the actual content, that content can be inflammatory in the society, and actually when you have movies made inside the countries that critically assess the recent past, that they open a new social discussion, very often, and now increasingly so in our country, we are seeing that they, with the best aim of opening a social criticism and the social discussion, you might end up putting fuel to the already existing and increasing tendencies in all our countries of the separation between the patriots and the traitors. And this has been in Macedonia because of our recent political past. We had to change the name, and probably will change other things now. And this increasing separation between the patriots and the traitors has become a very mainstreamed political conditionality. So even your media, oh wait, this is a patriot media, this is a, let's say, pro-Western and traitor media. It's the same also in Serbia. And it's quite strong. So how do you see not only the role of movies, but also different arts and especially literature? Can they bridge? Because, I mean, of course, we don't want to be in the same basket with nationalists. But at one point in time, this discussion, communication between these groups will have to take place. Otherwise, I mean, this extreme tension between these two groups and two very, very strong dominant ideologies without any middle space that kind of can allow for some negotiation, discussion, has to happen.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Hive and Quo Vadis Aida is exactly not taking sides. I mean, the subtlety that both Hive and Quo Vadis Aida are dealing with the war or the aftermath of the war. I mean, it's somewhere there in behind. You don't talk about. I mean, you don't tell it through film, but it's visible elsewhere. But the way that the story is being told is through a third perspective. And this is something that is, I think, extremely, extremely important. I mean, the story of literature is there also quite, I would say, it's quite similar to film. It's slower because it takes time to write a book. But during the 1990s and 2000s, I think the dominant stories were told about the war and the post-war realities by men who were young or, grown up at this era. Women were also taken out of and somehow they did not feel included in the field. And I think the new generation has come, both in Macedonia, Kosovo as well, and especially Bosnia and Serbia, of a new novelists and short story writers who are, again, not only dealing with the wars, but with all the things that came together with the wars, and that is poverty, the change of political system, also the change of roles, privatization, also the disappearance of working class. And these topics are, we can see, I think, both in literature and in film. And when we speak, I want to say something about what are the dominant topics and how the West perceives our film industry. One of our professors from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts says that actually the interest of the West towards the post-Yugoslav film ended with No Man's Land. And that is 2001. I mean, it received an Oscar in March 2002. And after that, the new stories came, but somehow I think we are being pushed into the realm of an, it's not a Balkan film industry, it's actually Eastern European. And some topics that are emerging, I think, in both Romania and Bulgarian, especially I would say Romanian has been quite strong in the past 15 years. And this is where I think the Western eye sees our films. And there is again a dominant narrative of what can be told from a person or from a filmmaker coming from Balkans or Eastern Europe, and what cannot. And I still think post-war reality, also female perspective, and the things are something that the Western eye wants to see. But also when you see how films are made, they're all the big films made here are all co-productions between at least 4 up to 8 to even 10 countries. And again, it can, if you again follow the money, it can tell a story of who finances what, who dictates or who dominates over the narrative, and how can you, if you don't belong to this narrative, how can you tell your story?
Can I just add to something? Both what Ana is saying, but what I also said earlier, the fact that what sells in the international market is determined by arbitrary forces, let's say.
With the invisible hand.
I don't want to dwell into that really, because it's a whole different can of worms. However, it should not, both, we're talking about Quo Vadis, Aida and Hyde in this case, but it should not deprive us from recognizing and from employing the nuances to our stories, because we are the owners of those nuances. We should insist to tell those nuances, even though the international market is not going to like them. So we should not end up exoticizing further our own stories. So this is, but then another thing that I wanted to add to that is that we're not talking, because when you say they are told from a third perspective, we cannot avoid having war as a character in the films that are being made in the region now, because it is a very traumatic event. It is a very big political moment. But however, what is revolutionary, at least for these films that I'm talking about, for example, Norika Sifas looking for Venera, Hype, Lerta Basholi, also Katrina Krasnici's Vera Dreams of the Sea, is that you don't have you don't have gunshots in the films. You don't have uniformed men in the films. So the war is there because it is a big determinator of what happened in Kosovo after it. And same with our film Fran and Verka that we made with Sauran 2 years ago. Like, you don't have gunshots, but you have the story of two Croats, a couple of Croats, like living completely isolated in a village in Kosovo, completely alone. And this is a result of war, for those who can untangle this history. We don't say it, we don't bring it up. We only mention war once in the description. But it invites for curiosity. That's what film should do. It should invite for curiosity so that people untangle this part of the history. And of course, they will go back to war. But it is revolutionary, for at least for Kosovo filmmaking, that we don't see gunshots, we don't reproduce war, because we recognize the fact that we are already traumatized. We don't want to reproduce trauma on screen.
That's important, as you say, that to have a certain independence from the tendencies and from the Western gaze, as you said. Now, this is what is to be expected from Balkan filmography. I've had this bit discussion with a filmmaker, a friend of mine from Macedonia, very successful, nominated for 2 Oscars also.
Now we know.
You know. But that I was sort of angry that we have to tell this sort of kind of a little bit more exoticized, self-exoticizing stories. And then why can't we make a movie about, I don't know, possible life on Mars and something like this? Why don't we, as a region, have a claim to these more universal issues, but we have to be localized and fetishized? And I was like, yeah, if you're coming from the Balkan, this small region in the world, and competing is an important word in this sense, competing with Latin American cinema and other countries, you have to tell, this is the stories that you can tell. You cannot sell something else, you can sell something that is expected, and then you try to do it better, in a better way, or try to find a more exotic story of probably a woman that does beekeeping in a very traditional way in a lost village in Macedonia. But you as a scriptwriter also, do you think that you are faced with the challenge of making a balance between doing something that is relevant for our own countries, that the movie and then this new art will have social relevance here, but then still will conform somehow to a sort of international expectation of what a Balkan movie can be? And basically my question would be rephrased: is the Balkan movie a trap in itself? That you have to always make basically the same thing?
Speaking from my perspective and what I have written so far and what I'm expecting to be produced next year, I personally try to put social commentary of the situation in our country, in my town, especially, but I'm moving towards the personal dramas of the characters, and I'm trying to be universal, trying to tell a story that is not particularly connected with Macedonia or Struga or the war, but to give a space for the individuals to tell their stories. They have past, they have future, that is not so much connected with the society, but it's with themselves. I wanted to add, I was thinking a lot about while they were speaking about the how to say, censorship, self-censorship when you write the story, which is a bit problematic these days. Either we are censoring ourselves or we are censored by the biggest producer. For example, in Macedonia, the only producer, real producer, is the Ministry of Culture or the film agency. So when you write a story, you must always think, what is the political situation, who is the leading party, who is in the ministry, and you always censor yourself thinking when you write the story. The next thing is the market, and you think about what is interesting now, what is on the topic that the festivals that we are aiming for are interested now. So I was thinking that Kosovo War, Bosnian War, Serbian War are really more welcomed by the big festival, or were more welcome. As you say, No Man's Land won the Oscar, but the topics are still like hot. Macedonian topics, the conflict was not that hot ever. But on the other side,
this is why it would be easier to kind of make films about
Yes,
this,
but
because
you think that
it
it's
was
not-
as if in Bosnia or Kosovo, so it was
Yes.
a lower intensity, so then it would be, you don't need so much courage to treat this issue in Macedonia.
True.
But we don't have any.
But we don't have even courage to write what is the past. Okay, as you said, there are not just ethnic differences here. We have political or party differences here, traitors and patriots. So what is the past? For example, we had a political situation for almost 10 years here in Macedonia, which was pretty interesting to look from the art side, you know? But no filmmaker ever tried to depict some of the things that happened, because a lot of things happened during those 10 years. There were even, like, there was a riot in the parliament, so we never try even to write or make a film about it. Why? Because who is the only producer in Macedonia? The film agency, the Ministry of Culture, the ruling party. So everybody are going into these individual stories that it's harder to go into the market, because we are 1.5 million people, 2 million people. With the individual stories that you want to be like global, international, and understandable for everybody. And we need to be a great filmmakers. For example, the Romanian New Wave was doing that, but they used the moment, and they were great in that period of 10 years. I loved when we started, I was writing in my thesis, I was seeing that as the new wave, when Vardan, George, and Darian produced movies that they were all social commentary on the society, but they were not dealing with ethnical or political problems. Now I know all the films that are produced now or will be produced next year, from Maria Apčevska, from George Junkovski. George was just finished his film. Everybody is dealing with individual dramas. So we are leaving the past behind somehow, without talking about it.
Yeah, without having it treated, we are leaving it already behind us. And if I was, when I was thinking these days, when Martin invited me to be host of this conversation, I was thinking to myself, which were the most famous international movies that deal with the past, that kind of left a certain impression on me. And then I was thinking of Nothing New in the Eastern Front, and of course Zone of Interest, which was the most, let's say, impactful to me movie. And we see that these two movies had quite huge international success, and they are dealing with a topic that has been, okay, you can never overexploit the Second World War. You can always have more and more on that. And I think that in the international, let's say, realm of cinematography, which is mixed with the international realm of media and of various media, not only the conventional one, I think that the things have become so fast, so that even these movies that are great movies, everybody praises them, but then we move on to the next thing, and then they don't have enough time, because of this speeding up and fast of the time, of the actual time in which we live in, that they don't have enough time for, to have a universal, probably discussion on the meaning of genocide, of Holocaust, and of war, or fronts where you just dump young people and they're just dying there for nothing. Because immediately after and during these movies, there was the Ukraine war, the Gaza war, and they consider that with the dispersion of different formats of videos with the new platforms, that the movies have lost sort of their impact that they used to have, let's say, 20 years ago, because now they have to compete with also short video, which producers are people with their actual experience in a war zone.
I wouldn't. This is something that it's an open discussion for reading. It's an open discussion for film. It's an open discussion for theater. They're all competing with the mainstream media, which is reels and TV. But film is not fast knowledge. It's not quick knowledge, such as it's not writing, it's not making theater. So it requires some sort of distance, I believe, in order for it to be meaningful. So it can never be compared to the media. The media should react as soon as possible to what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening at the current time. The film needs some sort of reflection. And I wouldn't say that it's competing or that its role is kind of diminished because of the new media. Because film and all these means of communication, of artworks, of art mediums, they always had their own audience, an audience that is not interested, and I think they will always have their own audience, and the audience that is interested in a reflection, in a digestion of information rather than reaction to information. Film should not react. Writing should not react. Theater should not react. It should digest. So I think as long as we have people who are interested in digesting rather than reacting, film and theater and like slow means of communication, if we are to put them in the box of means of communication, will be there to stay.
If I can add up, when the how to say it, the killings, the massacre in Ribnikar happened, there was immediately a discussion on Twitter, or X now, when is morally correct to make a movie about it. You know, immediately started a discussion. They started a discussion. It will happen, but when will be morally correct to have a bit of distance of what happened, and how will you present it to the audience? And this reminded me of the killings of 4 kids at Smilkovskoye Ozero in here in Macedonia. And there was a movie, but also there was a debate whether it was time to do that movie or it was too early. The trauma was too strong. Also, that's a past. We have a movie about it, actually. But when is okay to start thinking about that story, or what is the proper way to start researching that, or which angle you will show? Will you go inside of the kids? You will speak, have interviews with the real kids who were there, or either you will be the third person, someone who is working next to the school and he was just a witness from outside. And always when you're thinking about what angle you will take, you think, where is the drama bigger? If my character is the teacher in the next classroom, or is a barber across the street from the school.
Oh, sorry, just another thing, because this brought me an extra thing to say, that if you fall into this trap of reaction, the moment something is happening, you are alienated from the human feeling towards it. You look at it as a means to sell or control, and you fall in the very trap of this commercialism. That is the real threat to film, commercialism, not really the fastness with which it responds to situations. Because if you look at something as a means to exploit immediately, it's...
But to make a feature film in Europe, if it's not sponsored or you can follow the money, you need 5 years minimum. So you cannot just write a script about the Ribnikar incident and produce it next year or the same year. But if you have someone who will do that, then you must question why this project was financed so fast. So it's a propaganda or a way to make the public think something that the I don't know, someone wants to think.
Anna, if you would be invited by a production company to write a script about a relevant topic from the past in Serbia, what area would it be from? What do you think is the part in the Serbian cinematography that you think is a gray area that is not covered, and you think that there is a need for a deep social discussion about that, and that there is not been, or there has been, but not to your liking, a movie about that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the two films that I mentioned are filling in the voids that I personally needed. So I'm speaking from my perspective, but I think a big missing point is the death of the working class. Because if you analyze the films from 1991 in Serbian post-Yugoslav film, there are a lot of film about criminals and crime and the rise of institutional crime, and all kinds of documentaries depicting yes, and there are some films about the deprivation of the society when it comes to poverty, inflation, things like this, but they are usually commented through different art forms such as comedy. You would make a film about something else where you would put in how people are poor and how there's nothing to buy in the shops, and how you get 5 Deutschmarks for your salary and you just spend it on 2 eggs or something like this. But it's always somewhere behind. But when we're speaking about the privatization and the disappearance of working class, this is something that is absolutely not a topic of and we are talking about almost 35 years, of 33 years since the beginning of the war in Croatia, and the fact that it is somehow, I think, replaced by the story about criminal, and this is all. I mean, this also tells a story of what influenced our filmmakers, and that is. I mean, of course, in Hollywood and in American movies, films about Italian mafia and things like that were really, really present throughout, since the end of the Second World War until now. And this is, I think, we were also, our filmmakers were looking towards the West when it comes to also inspiration. And the stories of the criminals are, I would say, fairly easy to tell. So is, I think, the story of the boy killer. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a very interesting, and I think, speaking in terms of film, very photogenic in a way story. But I mean, how do you follow a person that is absolutely deprived out of its rights for like 30 years? This is something that is very, very potent. And I also think the stories of our mothers. And this is, again, something that is really missing, because at some point Yugoslavia was a big modernization period. They got a lot of rights, but they were also expected from a lot. And then the war came, and they were reduced to, again, yes, re-traditionalized to mothers and to nurses, and how do we tell the story of them, who were, of course, given the rights, but also were expected much more than their ancestors? And where does this female line of deprivation end? Does it?
Thanks, Anna, for bringing this very important aspect into the conversation, because I think that also starting from the Western gaze, whenever you speak in the Balkans about something in the past and dealing with the past, you're immediately expected to speak about
Yes.
but there was this other parallel war that was going on and still persists, which is the war against the working class, against the political manifestation, political presence of the working class, which was very destructive. And it has also, similar to the other wars, has produced a lot of consequences, social ones, that we are living through also today. And in the case of the new Kosovo cinematography, we have this new, let's say, intersectional gender commentary criticism, but the class aspect is not that much present. Why is it so? Is it because probably it is more expected that if you come from Kosovo and you have this gender war combination, it's going to be more appealing rather than this old school discussion about class and working class, which should have been derelicted to Zilnik and the other generation of directors from Yugoslavia?
I think it is more pragmatic than that, to be honest. I think that at least after the war, the entire identity of the working class has been stolen by the party that is ruling us currently, by the Velitosi party. So whoever would think of articulating their something from the perspective of a working class person, member, whatever, would be identified with Velitosi. But what I think is happening now, and this is just my personal opinion, when I sit at home in the evening, this is what I think about, is that what this ruling party is currently doing subversively, is this the word?
Yeah.
Is that they are completely shutting down the working class by controlling, by giving them breadcrumbs, which is the opposite of what they claim that they will be doing. So I think even if there was some ground while this party was in opposition for there to be a discussion about class, which of course they occupied violently, oppressively, now what they are doing is that they are shutting down completely the articulation of the working class, and now there are some groups, for example, the Comuna, Social Center, some anarchist groups, but they are, at least for me, and this could be my own issue, they are very isolated, very difficult to get through. It could be my problem. It could be that I'm very busy and I don't meet them. But I don't see them much in the discussion. So I think it will take years until we are healed and educated about the class discussion. So because the damage that the ruling party is currently
Another
doing.
very interesting aspect is, in the case of Kosovo, that if we have the production of this art and cinematography that is very closely related to the state, and then you have a party, whichever it is, it has their own ideas. Different from, let's say, North Macedonia or Serbia, and even Bosnia and Albania, as far as I know. You have movies that are, yes, mostly supported by the biggest producer, which is the state and the agencies for film. But it is in the case of Kosovo where the Prime Minister himself has been very involved in promoting the movies, going in every festival where the movies are. I experienced this one. So this big proximity of the centralized political figure with the process of production and promotion, and that has had some kind of initial positive comments from abroad, that look at this example in Kosovo, the Prime Minister is supporting their movies, our Prime Minister don't give a shit about us. But then that proximity, the intensity of that proximity becomes very problematic.
Exactly. The long term, it compromises because it compromises the mindset of the artist. Because if you are in close conversation with someone who is supposed to have big agendas, the Prime Minister by default, and you befriend them, your thoughts are going to be affected. So it's a compromise in the long term, in the very conceptual aspect of it. This is why I mentioned this vanishing of the shutting down of the working class, because it's not, in my opinion, this is something that I don't feel comfortable to discuss publicly, because it's not something that I can identify and say, this is how they're doing it. But they are doing it. And this is another thing, because quite frankly, when you're talking about the censorship, because of who funds the films, films in Kosovo are mainly funded by the Kosovo Cinematography Center, but I don't know of any film that has been controlled in any way.
Yeah.
And this is, no, in any way, censored, discussed about the content of it. Never. At least, of course, they can decide not to
self-censorship. Self-censorship.
This doesn't happen either. I mean, it could be more subversive, I'm saying again, but it doesn't happen either that we have this, as a society in general, as a mindset, that we have this idea, oh, maybe we're going to make something angry. If we think that we're going to make someone angry, we are the more eager to do it. So and it's thanks to the artists, really. It's thanks to the cultural workers. I'm not saying that it's thanks to the governments or to those in power.
Yeah. What Jakov said at the beginning is quite. I think that makes a little bit significant difference with the context in other countries, because, as he said, out of this conflict in Macedonia, we didn't split and separate countries. We still live in the same country, and that, I think, in most of the cases, because the decision makers of supporting the movies are still political, when you would turn up with a script that you want to tackle the, let's say, conflict in 2001 in Macedonia, they would say, let's not open this discussion now. Why go into problems? Who knows how we'll interpret this kind of topic? So, in the same sense, the advantages that we have, that we're not completely separated as a society, pose also disadvantage that we cannot really talk about some things because we are too proximate to each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that, I don't know, whatsoever movie or script that would take on a certain question like that would be supported by the agency here and now?
I think it will, not that they will ruled out, but when you were talking about, okay, there is the readers, there is the committee who decides, and they say, okay, this topic is too hot, it's not something that we want to see. And I was thinking, if I'm writing about that conflict, for example, I would try to make it, I will censor myself probably and try to put that war somewhere in between the life, as you said about which movie was that? The Hive?
The Hive.
Yes, Hive. So you will put it somewhere behind, but you will be artificial when you're writing the characters. For me, I don't know how to write those characters, because I'm from Struga, it's multi-ethnical town, but we don't discuss much about 2001. Nothing happened in Struga, and it stayed somewhere in the north of North Macedonia. But if a good script came, I don't think they will rule out. They will give money if the script is good. I mean, good as not propaganda good, but good script. But we are not brave enough so far to do it. I'm speaking for myself, and as I see a lot of my colleagues, directors and screenwriters.
It reminded me the question of the topics and what do they do when they do open a certain topic. And then when Ana was explaining a little bit earlier on the films in Serbia that deal with this period after the 90s, with the big social trauma of the transition, it reminded me that this movie Šabovel was a fantastic example of such a situation where you had to deal with this state corruption. Everybody's linked with everybody, with the missing babies in Serbia, which was historically a very traumatic point in history. But what happens after? This movie was a success. The story is there. There is an interest about these stories. And the movie itself was very nice. But what happens after? what is the kind of feedback or what is the follow-up of society, journalists, activists after some movies like this? So they reveal probably the continuation of the state system, which has done these injustices, and it's still there in place. Probably not the very same people, but the very same mentality with deep connections to everything.
Unfortunately, nothing much, because I think that the terror that the state has done to certain parts of the society is something that has never been dealt with. It doesn't matter if those are ethnical divisions or the stolen babies or the working class that was deprived of their rights, the refugees who were taken back to the war zones, and I mean all kinds of injustices that I think the state, unfortunately, where I live, has done to its citizens as such. And for example, the topic of missing babies is again important after the film has lived this life, which is, as you said, getting smaller and smaller, because one good thing is that the production has risen a lot in the past 10 years, especially in Serbia. And so the life of the certain movies is super short and sometimes even only limited to the festivals and not to the cinema. To the theaters, film theaters as such. It comes back to NGO sector, and it's the NGO sector that deals with these topics again. Also, I wanted to mention one thing, and this is, how the professors from the faculty call them the films of normalization. There is a big, yes, there is a quite a huge wave of films that are not dealing with the past at all, or that are dealing with the past, telling the story through, let's say, family movies. One example of this is The Summer I Learned to Fly. It's called Leto kad sam naučila da letim. It tells a story of Serbian-Croatian conflict through a girl that is traveling to Hvar, to the island of Hvar, and learning her family history. And these films are actually, we could discuss whether it's a matter of cowardice or courage. Decide to tell the story from another angle, but there are also a lot of stories dealing with the history that is not First World War, nor Second World War, nor the conflicts of the 1990s, and there were great successes. The films about the Yugoslav football team in Uruguay in 1932, and then the films about taken from the literature of very famous Serbian writers from the end of the 19th century, and so on and so forth. And these films are actually, in a way, trying to, I would say, fight for the audience without the terror of the topics, and also pointing out to the, to be very, very commercial in a way. And some of these films are also dealing, the films that, for example, Dragan Bjelogrlić did about the Vinča incident and the famous folk singer Toma Zdravković. Those are also the films that belong to the normalcy, but they also tell a story of how they actually, those are not films that would be quite successful in festivals, but those are films who would be successful when it comes to cinemas and the selling.
To the mass production of some certain culture in the countries. We have that the tendency in different countries. But a little bit earlier, I think that we spoke that this time for dramatic movies from the Balkans in the international competitions and international festivals has passed that you cannot redo. I think that that is not true because I just reminded recently the man who refused to remain silent won the best short film in Cannes Festival. So
Okay.
there is still this sort of kind of probably an interest in the West for this sort of movies from the Balkans. And when I say the West, it is important for us because we are historically, politically, economically entangled with this West. We cannot detach ourselves and say we just cannot tell stories to ourselves. We don't matter what they think or what is their opinion of us because we, as I said, are geographically also entangled with this part of Europe. So I think that there will be more and more, most probably, opportunities where the new generation of filmmakers will find something interesting, different, will find a gap in a narrative that has been there but has not, that does not resonate or communicate with the younger generation, or they see that these have been tendencies of extremely very dictated processes that did not allow for a wider discussion, a bigger spectrum of different approaches. And I think that with the making available of the new technological tools, it's going to become more easy and more independent films will be made cheaper rather than that you have to rely on huge funds and then decisions, big decisions behind this political are highly relevant politically. So I think that maybe the combination of these two or three elements is providing a good ground for the future. So in those terms, what would you like to see in the future as Balkan cinematography, not only in Kosovo but also in other countries? Because we have had also this experience, which to me was a little bit curious and interesting, and I was like, huh, but you don't have to be from Kosovo to make a movie in Kosovo. We had a movie in Skopje, shot and filmed in Skopje by a Macedonian director, which dealt with the Bosnian War, The Happiest Person on Earth.
Yeah.
So maybe this would be the sort of breakage where everybody could have a sort of take and narration and open a social discussion with the aspects of the past that happened. I don't really have to write only about my personal, very intimate experience, but we can maybe spread in the region and then start. And this probably would open up a more democratic space when everybody can have a say about everything.
I don't really know. I don't know. There are many things that I want to do, but they are mostly related to the past. But I think what Anna said earlier, that these gaps are already, because now you also reminded me, these gaps are already being filled by, again, young directors. For example, you have Ilir Hassan's Workers' Wings that is making its way in festivals and now is waiting to whether it will become a candidate for Oscars or not. You have, for example, Four Pills at Night by Lear Drama that tells a different story. You have the film that we made with Ilir Hassan. As I was looking above, I could see myself underneath, that tells the stories of queer persons in Kosovo. You have this documentary that's being made by this young film director, Aurela Kadriu. She's making this film about Adelina Ismaili, this pop icon. So she's unpacking something completely out of everyone's radar. I mean, we all spoke about Adelina, but we never thought of her that way. So she is dealing with that. So there are many angles to which film is promising in Kosovo. So I don't know. I am curious to see what these filmmakers are curious about, because they are opening paths for curiosity, because we live in an environment that does not really invite for curiosity. This is a very, very big problem. Because everything is answered already. This is a different discussion. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what they are curious about, really, because it's very interesting to see the topics that they are choosing.
Anna, before we have the last words from everybody, do you think that maybe in Serbia there is a little bit of a sort of authoritative presence of the big names of few directors that the younger generation is not fighting against them, but they cannot compete with them with their market dominance or with their social dominance in the country.
Yes, I mean, both theater and film are really marked by these big, old, unfortunately all male directors, and theater is as well really male dominated and really director dominated and not script writer or writer, God forbid, dominated. And I mean, again, in order to be successful, the film needs support by Film Center of Serbia, which is controlled by the Ministry of Culture and the ruling party. And there were a lot of problems and even scandals in the past 10 or 15 years with the working of Film Center of Serbia. But as you said, I mean, luckily things are getting cheaper, and I think when we speak about smaller movies, that it would be possible to do it even without the big support by the state. But what I wanted also to say is about who you want your audience to be. For example, you mentioned Nebojša Slijepčević film. It's very universal, and I think that's why it is successful. You don't need to know the story of Štrpci in order to understand what this person, Tomo Buzov, has done. So we can tell these stories and then be turned to the international audience, or we can again maybe tell, as Aurela said, story about our own local context. And I think the beauty of the fact that it's getting it's getting easier to make films is that we can open up to many ideas. Because when you read an autobiography or a biography of a film director, a famous one, you realize that what he made was just a choice of what he wanted, and it could be quite random. Because sometimes he wouldn't or she wouldn't get the funds for what she wanted. So it's a choice of all these good or not so good ideas that he or she had. So maybe the future of technology is also the future where we could more easily tell the stories that nobody wants to finance.
Yeah. And in that direction, Jakov, do you think that you would, let's say, sacrifice a script of yours for an independent movie without funds, or you would wait for it to get serious funding from always the state?
Well, I would say that it's not sacrificing if you have a good team and good enthusiasm, and to shoot a movie without having the funds from the state. But I'm gonna say it's not easy. 2 days ago, we finished an independent movie that we financed by ourselves, and it turned out that it's much more difficult than we thought. But we were a small team, and if we're talking about a feature film, which is not financed by our main producer in Macedonia, then we need to talk about a great script and a crew that will love the story. It's totally different from this topic, but I'm always giving the example of a ghost story, the film which is made with $100,000 in USA with 2 Oscar winners, and it was highly appreciated by the critics and by the audience. So I'm thinking that it's not sacrificing if you do it like that. But anyway, it's our destiny to try and wait from the film fund to get the money.
We hope that destiny will bring up better perspectives in the future, because this is how the podcast is called, Balkan Perspectives. And on that note, on this already afternoon on a rainy Sunday in Skopje, thank you for sharing your thoughts with this, and thanks for the hosts for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,